I was trying to focus when it happened. That's the part that keeps bothering me. How ordinary the moment was supposed to be. Fluorescent lights buzzing. The faint smell of oil and dust. A stack of intake forms sliding slowly toward the edge of my desk. Nothing about that afternoon was meant to change anything. And then she leaned closer and said, quietly, almost kindly, "Stop pretending." I worked the front desk at a small repair shop tucked between a bakery and a closed-down travel agency. Most days blur together. Broken screens, bent frames, people more attached to their phones than to the stories they tell while waiting. She came in just before 3, when the place goes oddly still, like the day itself is holding its breath. She wasn't in a rush. That was the first thing I noticed. Mid-40s, maybe older. Hard to tell because she carried herself like time wasn't something she argued with. A light scarf, shoes that had been worn enough to be chosen on purpose. She placed her phone on the counter without sliding it, her fingers resting there a second longer than necessary. "It keeps freezing," she said. "Only when I need it." I smiled automatically, the one I use with everyone. Asked the usual questions. She answered them, but not in a hurry. When I asked for her name, she paused, like she was deciding whether it mattered. "Claire," she said finally. I typed it in and pretended not to notice the way she watched me do it. Not my hands, my face. Like she was checking whether I meant the smile or not. While I ran diagnostics, she wandered the shop, reading old flyers we never took down. Community classes. A lost cat from 2 years ago. I could feel her presence even when she wasn't near the counter, like the air had shifted slightly off balance. "You always this serious?" she asked. I looked up. "At work?" "No," she said, tilting her head. "In general." I laughed a little too fast. I try not to mess things up. She didn't respond right away. Just came back to the counter and leaned her elbows on it, closer than necessary. That's when I noticed the faint line near her mouth, the kind you get from holding things in instead of saying them. She smelled like clean soap and something warmer underneath. "You're pretending," she said. Softer this time. Not accusing. Observant. I didn't know what to say, so I went back to the screen. The phone wasn't freezing. It was fine. I knew that. She probably did too. When I handed it back, our fingers brushed. Not dramatically. Barely. Still, my hand forgot what it was doing for half a second. She noticed. I know she did because her mouth twitched, like she'd caught a private joke. "Thank you," she said. Then, as if reconsidering, "Do you ever get tired of fixing things for other people?" I shrugged. "It's easier than fixing your own." That earned me a look. Longer this time. Something unreadable passed between us. Curiosity, maybe. Or recognition. She nodded once, like I'd confirmed something she already suspected. She left without rushing, the bell over the door chiming too loudly after her. I stood there longer than I needed to, staring at the counter where her hands had been. I've replayed that moment more times than I should. The way she leaned in, the way she said my secret out loud. And I still don't know how she saw through me so easily. She came back 3 days later, and this time I wasn't surprised, just unsettled in a way I couldn't explain. The shop was louder than usual, someone arguing in the back over a stripped screw, a radio stuck between stations. I was replacing a cracked tablet screen when the bell rang. I didn't look up right away, but I knew. Some part of me had already leaned toward the door before my eyes did. "Hi," she said. Not "Claire, this is broken" polite. Just hi, like we'd paused a conversation and picked it up again. I offered to help her transfer files to a backup drive, said it like it was routine. She nodded, thanked me, followed me to the small work table in the corner. The chair across from mine wobbled when she sat. She didn't mention it, just steadied herself with one hand on the table. Her fingers were slender, the nails short and clean. Practical. I wondered when she'd last done something impractical. She watched me work in silence. Not hovering, present. When the progress bar stalled, she sighed, rubbed the bridge of her nose with her thumb and forefinger. Up close, I could see the tiredness she carried. Not exhaustion exactly. More like someone who'd been alert for too long. "You okay?" I asked, then immediately wished I hadn't. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Just a long week." I nodded, letting the hum of the machines fill the space. I didn't ask follow-ups. She seemed grateful for that. At one point she laughed, quiet, surprised by something on the radio. It was softer than I expected, like she hadn't used it in a while. She covered her mouth with her knuckles as if embarrassed by the sound. I pretended to focus on the cables, but I cataloged everything. The way her shoulders dropped afterward, how she exhaled like she'd given something up. "Do you ever think about leaving?" she asked suddenly. "Here," I said. She shrugged. "Anywhere." I hesitated. "Sometimes." She nodded again. That same single nod. Guarded, measured. "Me too," she said, then added, "Not that I will." The drive finally finished. I handed it to her. Our hands didn't touch this time, and the absence felt louder than the contact had before. She stood, hesitated like she might say something else. Her eyes flicked to the door, then back to me. "You're good at noticing things," she said. "It's rare." I started to deflect, but she was already stepping away. At the door, she paused, turned just enough to meet my eyes. "For what it's worth," she said softly, "I wasn't pretending the other day." Then she was gone, leaving the air heavier than before, and me sitting there, staring at my hands, wondering what she'd been brave enough to admit and what she'd decided to keep. It was raining the night, everything almost tipped. Not cinematic rain, just the kind that turns the streetlights blurry and makes people linger where they shouldn't. The shop should have been closed, but her laptop had crashed mid-update and she'd sounded off on the phone. I told myself I stayed late because it was my job. That was easier than admitting I'd already put my jacket back on when I heard her voice. She arrived damp around the edges, hair pulled into a loose knot that had given up. She apologized twice. I waved it off and locked the door behind her, the click too final for how quiet the room suddenly felt. The place looked different at night. Lights dimmed, tools half-shadowed, the radio off. Just the rain tapping against the windows, uneven, impatient. I worked while she hovered near the counter, hands wrapped around a paper cup I'd filled from the kettle we weren't supposed to have. She didn't drink it, just held it, like it was grounding her. "My ex used to fix things," she said suddenly. "Not electronics. People." I didn't look up. "How'd that go?" A pause. Long enough that I thought I'd overstepped. "He was very good at it," she said. "Until he wasn't." I glanced at her then. She was watching the rain, not me. One shoulder lifted in a half shrug. Defensive. Careful. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She flinched. Didn't check it. "You don't have to stay," she said. "I can come back tomorrow." "It's fine," I said too quickly. Then, slower, "I don't mind." The update stalled. Again, I muttered under my breath, leaned closer to the screen. She stepped in without thinking, peering over my shoulder. Too close. I could feel the heat from her arm, the faint brush of her sleeve against my wrist. Neither of us moved. "You always do that," she murmured. "Do what?" "Lean away when something gets close." I swallowed. "You notice a lot." She smiled, but there was something brittle in it. "It's a curse." Her phone buzzed again. This time she answered, turning slightly away. I caught fragments. His name, "A tired not tonight," a breath held too long. When she hung up, her hand trembled. Just a little. She tucked it into her pocket like she'd been caught. "I shouldn't be here," she said. "Not asking." I nodded. Didn't argue. Didn't step back either. The laptop finally chimed, finished. I closed it, turned toward her. We were closer than before. Close enough that I could see the faint line between her brows, the one that only showed when she was deciding something. For a second, I thought she might say it. Whatever it was. My chest tightened. I stayed still, hands open at my sides, like any movement might tip the balance. She reached out, then stopped, her fingers hovering near my sleeve. "Thank you," she said instead. I watched her walk out into the rain, my hand still lifted where hers almost had been, the space between us louder than any confession. She didn't come back for over a week. I told myself it was normal. People got busy. Things stopped breaking. But the shop felt louder without her, like something subtle had been removed and the room didn't know how to adjust. I caught myself glancing at the door whenever the bell rang, then pretending I hadn't. When she finally did come in, it was late afternoon. Sun slanting through the front window, catching dust in the air. She stood just inside the door longer than necessary, like she was bracing herself. "Hey," I said. "Hey." Her voice was steadier than her eyes. I gestured toward the counter. She didn't move. Instead, she looked at the chair in the corner, the one she'd sat in before. "Can we talk?" she asked. We sat. Not close. Not far. The space between us felt intentional. She folded her hands in her lap, unfolded them, took a breath that didn't quite make it all the way down. She stopped. "Tried again. I don't do this." "Do what?" I asked quietly. "Notice," she said. "Lean in. Let things linger." I waited. My instinct was to fill the silence, to make it easier for her. I didn't. She looked at me then. Really looked. Her gaze held mine longer than was comfortable, longer than was safe. I felt seen in a way that made me want to look away. "What are we doing?" she asked. It wasn't accusatory. It wasn't flirtatious. It sounded like someone standing at the edge of something they didn't plan for. "I don't know," I said. "Honest. Fair." She nodded, as if that was the only answer she'd accept. That's the problem. A customer laughed outside. A car passed. The world kept moving, oblivious. "I'm not lonely," she said suddenly. "That's the part one need you to understand." I didn't interrupt. I have a life. Friends. A history I don't regret, even if parts of it still ache. Her mouth tightened on that last word. "But when I'm here, when I'm with you, I feel out of step. Like I missed a turn somewhere." My throat tightened. I wanted to say it wasn't just her. That I felt it too. That every time she left, the room felt wrong. Instead, I said, "We can stop." The word hung there. Heavy. Necessary. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were wet but steady. "I don't want to," she said. "And that scares me." We sat in that truth, neither reaching for the other. No touch. Just the quiet awareness that something unnamed had shifted. She stood first, smoothed her scarf, put herself back together piece by piece. At the door, she paused, her hand resting on the frame like she might need it to stay upright. "If this breaks," she said without turning around, "I don't know if I'll survive pretending it didn't matter." The shift didn't come with an argument or a door slamming. It arrived folded into something small, almost polite. She brought it with her the next time she came in, an old phone, the kind with a cracked corner and a battery that barely held. She set it on the counter like it weighed more than it should. "I don't need it fixed," she said quickly, before I could ask. "I just need something off it." I nodded, took it anyway. My hands felt clumsier than usual. The shop was quiet again, late enough that the sun had dipped low and left everything in that muted, end-of-day blue. "There's a voicemail," she said. "I can't bring myself to delete it, but I can't keep carrying it either." I didn't ask whose voice it was. She didn't offer. I plugged the phone in. It took longer than it should have to load. She stood close, but not touching, arms folded tight across her chest like she was holding herself together. When the file finally played, I wasn't supposed to listen. I know that. I tried not to. But the sound filled the space before I could stop it. A man's voice. Warm. Familiar in a way that made my stomach drop. "Claire, I know you hate unfinished conversations. So here's mine." Her breath caught. Sharp. Like she'd been bracing for impact and still wasn't ready. I stared at the screen, not the words. Not her. The voice talked about timing. About almosts. About being proud of her for choosing the hard, right thing. It wasn't dramatic. That was the worst part. It sounded like someone who had loved her carefully. She reached out then, not to me, but to the phone. Her fingers hovered, shaking, before she pulled them back. "He died," she said. Just that. No lead-in. No softening. I swallowed. "I'm sorry. He was younger," she added, like she needed to justify something. Brilliant. Impulsive. He made me feel awake. A beat. I left because I was scared of how much. The voicemail ended. The shop felt too quiet afterward, like even the machines were listening. She laughed once, short and humorless. "Do you know what he used to say to me?" I shook my head. "Stop pretending." Her eyes lifted to mine. Searching. Careful. "That's why I froze the first day you said it." Something in my chest shifted, slow and painful. I handed the phone back. Our fingers brushed this time, neither of us pulling away. She looked tired in a way I hadn't seen before. Not worn down, but exposed. "I don't think you're him," she said softly, as if reading my thoughts. "That would be easier." I nodded. "I know." She took a step back. Then another. putting space where it belonged, or where she thought it should. "Thank you," she said, "for not asking me to be someone else." At the door, she paused, her hand on the handle. She didn't turn around. "But sometimes," she added, voice barely holding, "you make me feel like I'm standing at the same edge again. Only this time, I know what the fall costs." She didn't come in with a problem to fix this time. It was early, before the shop officially opened. I was halfway through unlocking the door when I saw her across the street, standing under the awning of the bakery like she wasn't sure which way to go. No phone in her hand, no bag, just her, waiting. I let her in without saying anything. The silence felt different now, not charged, not sharp. Tired, honest. She walked in slowly, like she was stepping onto unfamiliar ground. Looked around the shop as if it had changed while she was gone. Maybe it had. "I almost didn't come," she said. "I know," I replied. She nodded, accepting that I did. She sat on the stool by the counter, the one that wobbled. This time, she noticed. Shifted her weight until it steadied. I liked that she didn't ignore small truths anymore. We didn't talk right away. I made coffee. She watched me without hiding it. When I handed her the mug, our fingers touched and stayed that way for half a second longer than necessary. Neither of us apologized. "I've been trying to name this," she said finally. "What's happening? What's already happened?" "And?" I asked. She shook her head. "Every word feels like a trap." I leaned back against the counter. "Then don't name it." That earned me a look, surprised, then relieved. She took a sip of coffee and winced. "Too hot." She laughed quietly, the sound unguarded. "I'm not going to be brave," she said. "Not in the way people expect. I'm not going to leap. I'm not asking you to." She studied my face, like she was checking for fine print. "This doesn't end cleanly," she said. "I need you to know that." "I know," I said again. Different this time. Steadier. She set the mug down and rested her hands on the counter. They were trembling, just slightly. I reached out without thinking and placed my hand over hers. Not gripping, just there. She exhaled. A long, careful breath. Didn't pull away. We stayed like that, the shop waking up around us, machines humming, lights fully bright now. Ordinary sounds framing something quietly irreversible. "I don't want to disappear from this," she said. "And I don't want to pretend it's nothing." "I don't want either of those things," I said. She turned her hand palm up beneath mine. A small, deliberate choice. I felt it everywhere. After a while, she stood and stepped closer. Not into me, just near enough that our shoulders touched. She rested her forehead briefly against my arm, like she needed the contact but not the spectacle of it. We didn't kiss. We didn't promise anything. We just stood there, breathing in the same space, letting the truth settle without forcing it into shape. When she finally pulled back, she smiled. Not happy, exactly. More at peace with the risk. "Okay," she said. It wasn't a beginning or an ending, just an acknowledgement. And somehow, that was enough to know we weren't turning away anymore. I'm telling this from a few months later, when things have settled into something quieter, not simpler, just honest. We didn't rush. That might be the thing that saved us. No dramatic first night. No sweeping decision that pretended the world wouldn't notice. What we did instead was small. Coffee before work. Long walks that didn't need a destination. Sitting together without filling every silence. Learning which ones were comfortable and which ones asked to be answered. What changed first was me. I stopped performing the version of myself I thought people wanted, the capable, agreeable guy who fixed things and never asked for more. Around her, that version fell apart gently. I learned that wanting didn't make me reckless. That patience wasn't weakness. That standing still, when everything in you wants to rush forward, can be its own kind of courage. What changed in her took longer. At first, she kept checking herself, like she was waiting for consequences to catch up. She flinched at happiness, apologized for moments that didn't need it. But slowly, I watched her loosen, not dramatically, not all at once. She laughed without covering her mouth. She let herself be tired in front of me. She stopped explaining her past like it was a warning label. One night, months in, she said something that stayed with me. "I don't feel like I'm chasing something anymore," she said, "or running from it." That's when I realized this wasn't about age, or timing, or even the fear that hovered around us in the beginning. It was about being seen without being consumed. About choosing each other not because it was easy, but because it was honest. Love, I've learned, doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it shows up quietly and asks if you're willing to stay present. If you can hold your ground without gripping too tight. If you can accept that it won't fix you, but it might walk beside you while you do that work yourself. We still don't pretend it's perfect. We don't pretend it won't hurt sometimes. But we also don't pretend it doesn't matter. Every now and then, I think back to that first day. Me trying to focus, her leaning closer, calling me out with a single sentence. I didn't know then that she wasn't breaking my concentration. She was breaking my pattern. And I'm grateful she did. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?